Welcome to this latest edition of the Real Deal Podcast. I'm your host, Real Joe Quinn, recording on this Tuesday evening, election night. Now, I have been kind of going back and forth to decide whether or not I was even going to do a podcast tonight or just wait till after the election and give a whole show recap and what have you. I'm going to do the best of both worlds. I'm going to do a sports podcast today, the usual NFL podcast tonight, and do a mini pod on the election recap. Hopefully by the end of the week. I mean, hopefully this thing doesn't drag out doesn't drag out too long. Maybe at the latest by Thursday. Hopefully by Friday I can put out a mini pod on the election and what the results and what to look forward to in 2025 and what what transpired in regards to the control of the House and Senate and all that good stuff. So no election stuff tonight on this particular podcast, but I will have a mini pod coming up later in the week. Hope everybody out there goes out there and vote. Still, if you're on the East Coast, I mean, most places don't close till 8 o'clock, so you still have time from that standpoint. Again, if you don't vote, then shut the fuck up. You have nothing to complain about if you don't vote. It's just that simple. Sit in the couch. I don't want to hear it. No, it's not an excuse. Get off your ass, vote. Period. There is zero excuse not to go out there and vote. But as always, and by the time you hear this, of course, the election won't be over, but we'll probably have a great sense tomorrow, a pretty good sense of who will be the 47th president of these United States. But as always, we're going to talk sports and some pop culture. Of course, a loss of a legend in Quincy Jones. We'll discuss that later on in the podcast, but we begin with the NFL's game of the week. Kansas City continues to stay undefeated, taking out Tampa Bay 30-24. They improved to 8-0 on the season. Kansas City, they were beatable. They were beatable in this game for sure. Tampa Bay played played with a lot of heart, considering how many injuries they have especially to the receiving core. But Kansas City was able to that does what Kansas City does. That's win close games. Survived a scare with Mahomes looking like he was seriously injured for a second in terms of a non-contact injury. He came right back. They held Tampa Bay to 284 yards of offense. Even though Tampa Bay was able to put 24 points on the board, which is a lot for Kansas City to give up. Kansas City has one of the top scoring defenses in the league. But Kansas City was able to hold on and improve to 8-0 and continue their stranglehold on the AFC, not only the division, but the AFC conference as a whole. They are 2 games clear of any team in the AFC, and 2 games in November is a lot. Like, that's a lot. We are in November now. Right. Well, before you know it, it'll be Thanksgiving. So to give some historical context to what Kansas City is doing, they, out of the last 21 teams to start 8-0, the last team to start 8-0 was 2022 Philadelphia Eagles. And that ended with them losing to Kansas City in the Super Bowl, of course, a couple years back. Most of these teams have not gone on to win the Super Bowl. Only the 2006, our last 21 teams to start 8-0, only the 06 Indianapolis Colts won the Super Bowl. So keep that in mind. Also, Kansas City's point differential is at 56. That means, so you do the math, they're only beating teams by an average of 7 points a game. That is the lowest point differential for an 8-0 team in NFL history. You got to go back to the 1990 San Francisco 49ers, who, like Kansas City, were seeking a three-peat. Their point differential, Kansas City, the 49ers point differential that year was 60. So they were winning, like Kansas City, they were winning a lot of close games as well. Again, nothing has changed. Kansas City, of course, asked DeAndre Hopkins. He obviously paid immediate dividends with his performance. Listen, people, you can talk all you want about Kansas City being vulnerable. They're barely winning, so on and so on. It doesn't matter. Kansas City, and I said this on the podcast a couple of weeks ago. I will continue to say it. They're playing chess. Everybody else is playing checkers. They are beyond comfortable in these close games. Beyond comfortable. They have a great kicker. You have Mahomes. You have Andy Reid. Their defense they have a big time defense that makes plays. They are more than comfortable in these games. Like they are so comfortable in these games. So it's not. I don't. Are they vulnerable? Not really. Not really. They're not vulnerable. I'm sorry. They are clearly the team to beat. Clearly the team to beat. It's not even a question. I love Detroit's playing great. Baltimore can look unbeatable at times, but there's one team in the NFL right now that is at the top of the heap. And until I see otherwise, I don't. Again, as long as Mahomes is upright, they to me remain the standard and the team to beat in the NFL, even for 2024, and still the Super Bowl favorites. I mean, that's all there is to it. Mahomes played well in this game. Probably one of his better games of the season. No interceptions. So that's something that I'm sure Kansas City, if you're a Kansas City fan, you love to see. Again, Tampa Bay played well. I mean, Tampa Bay could have easily won this game. They did some nice things. Of course, they're right in the thick of the playoff race in the NFC. They just gotta get healthy. So hopefully, if you're a Tampa Bay fan, you can get some of the receivers back, can get healthy at the right time to make a run at your division and make a run into the playoffs. Game 4, Buffalo, Miami. Buffalo does what it always does to Miami. That's beat them 30-27. This was a game that Miami really had an excellent opportunity to win. I can make a case that they even outplayed Buffalo. They outgained them. They outrushed Buffalo. Tua came back, played great. Only had 3 incompletions for the whole game, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions, but it wasn't enough. Josh Allen, to me, again, I know Lamar Jackson has played great, and we'll talk more about Lamar Jackson over the course of this podcast, but to me, Josh Allen is the MVP of the league. Buffalo does not have a lot of talent. This is not a vintage Buffalo team by any stretch of imagination. Their defense is not what it once was. The pass rush is not what it once was. Now, they still force turnovers, but Josh Allen is absolutely carrying this team. There's no two ways about it. 17 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. He's still one of the most dangerous players in football when on the run in terms of making plays with his legs or with his arm. So I think right now, if I had an MVP vote, I would vote Josh Allen a slight edge over Lamar Jackson. And by the way, I don't have MVP voter fatigue for Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson has played incredible football this year. He is right there with the MVP. And by the way, I would have no problem if you gave Lamar Jackson the MVP. He's played at a super high level, for sure. But I'm looking at who's doing more with less. And, even though they beat Buffalo earlier this season, Buffalo has a better record. And Josh Allen, frankly, this is not even an issue. Josh Allen has a lot less talent around him than compared to Lamar Jackson. Again, the defense is playing well. They're a top 10 defense in terms of points against. So we gotta keep that in mind. But they're not as talented as they once were in the last 2 or 3 years. They're not. Like Buffalo would be top 10, they would have a legit top 5, top 3, top 5 defense. Their defense ranks 17 yards, 8th in points allowed, which is the most important stat. But they're not as talented. Across the board, offensively and defensively, they're not as talented as they once were, but they are finding ways to win. They have absolutely ran away with that division. That division is done. They're the only team in that division that has a winning record. But Buffalo has they have a big time stretch coming up, a gauntlet for the next 5 weeks. 5 weeks. You're talking about at Indianapolis, which won't be easy, home to Kansas City, bye week, home to San Francisco, at Los Angeles, and at Detroit. That is a rough that. And then after that, it's a cakewalk. You're talking about New England, the Jets, and the Patriots twice. So they get through this. I don't think they'll catch Kansas City for home field. 2 games is a lot. Well, a game and a half is a lot. 2 games that lost count is a lot. They're going to be battling, the likes of Baltimore, the likes of Houston for that number 2 slot, that number 2 spot in the AFC. You still, even though it's not, even though you play on the first weekend with the number 2 spot, you still want that home. You still want that game at home. So again, Buffalo this season has it's been an interesting year for the Buffalo Bills because there were people who thought that they would take a step back. There were some people who even thought that they might even miss the playoffs. I wasn't one of them. I didn't think they were going to miss the playoffs, but they really found ways to win. They've really played. You got to give McDermott a lot of credit because again, this is the least most talented Buffalo Bills team that they've had in about 4 or 5 years. Like pound for pound, this is the least most talented Bills team that they've had in the last 4 or 5 years. Now, you could say that part of it is the fact that the division has completely just fallen apart. Miami with the injuries, the Jets are a shit show, and New England is one of the worst teams in football. That's fair, which would be fair, but Buffalo has gone on the road and destroyed Seattle. They've had some quality wins. They've beaten teams. They've destroyed the teams that they've had. They had a close loss to Houston. And they've taken care of business against the bad teams for the most part. And again, the Arizona win. And by the way, that Arizona win is looking better and better by the week. That opening week Arizona win is looking better. I remember as they beat Arizona in opening week in Buffalo, 34-28. So Buffalo continues to play well and improves to 7-2 on the season. Detroit handles Green Bay 24-14 in a game that really wasn't even that close. Detroit was in control of this game basically from start to finish. Green Bay couldn't do anything in the red zone. Detroit looked more comfortable in the bad weather than Green Bay did, to be honest with you. You can tell Jordan Love is still not healthy. And Detroit does what Detroit does. Detroit's going to run the football. They're going to run the football. Jared Goff, they're not going to let Jared Goff do too much, even though he's played great. But Detroit right now is playing as well as any team in football right now. To be honest with you, this team has an identity. There's a magic about Detroit right now. There's an attitude about Detroit right now, a confidence that you can tell that they believe that they are amongst the best teams in all of football. This is a big loss for Green Bay because right now as we stand, Green Bay will still make the playoffs and I think this probably ended Green Bay's hopes at the division because they are 0-3 against Detroit and Minnesota combined, and they get swept, and they have 2 of those losses are at Lambeau Field. So they've lost to both Detroit and Minnesota at Lambeau Field. Detroit sweeps Green Bay, and again Detroit and Green Bay Green Bay is 0-3 against those two teams that are ahead of them in that division. So Green Bay, just get the playoffs healthy and see what happens. But the division, I cannot foresee Green Bay making a serious run at the division. Green Bay had a number of opportunities in this game, but couldn't do anything. Could not do anything in the red zone. Green Bay was 1 for 4 in the red zone. Had just dumb penalties. Held Detroit. Listen, they held Detroit to 261 yards of offense. Detroit did not put down a lot. The biggest play in this game, of course, came right before the half, which that sealed the deal. You had a 10-3 game, and it was a 10-3 game. So this game was still in the balance, 10-3. And Jordan Love tries to and he does this sometimes and it gets him in trouble. tries to make something out of nothing, and nothing was there, and he throws a pick six. So you go from 10-3 to you go from 10-3 to 17-3, and then Detroit gets the ball, scores in the scores in the third quarter, and that 24-3, that was game set match at that point. At that point, Detroit didn't need to do anything in the fourth quarter, as they just just did stayed away from big turnovers, stayed away from any turnovers, and kept it moving. And they are in complete control of that division for sure. So big win for Detroit at Lambeau Field. Washington gets a workmanlike win over the Giants 27-22. This game probably should not have been that close. Washington kind of played around this game, kept the Giants in this game. Again, this game should not have been that close, to be perfectly honest with you. They easily could have put the Giants away much sooner. But kept the Giants around. You never thought the Giants were going to win this game. One thing concerning about Washington, if you want to nitpick, and it feels great to be able to nitpick a Washington Commander team. Like how long has it been since you were able to say that as you're a Commander fan? But the running game, the rush defense of Washington hasn't been good all season, and it's been terrible the last two games. The Giants, all the Giants can do is run, because I would Daniel Jones is when he drops back and throws the ball, he is a bottom half quarterback. He's one of the worst quarterbacks in the league. So all they can do is run. They were able to run for 164 yards. 164 yards. That's troubling if you're a fan of the Commanders moving forward. They're going to face some Washington teams that like to run the ball. Eagles twice, Steelers and the Steelers and what have you. So keep that, and the Cowboys. Well, forget about the Cowboys right now, but they're going to face some teams that like to run the football moving down the stretch. So that's something to keep your eye on. But regardless of that, the Commanders improved to 7-2, 3-2 on the road. They have a bunch of home games coming up in this key stretch of their schedule. They picked up Marshawn Lattimore from the Saints. Marshawn Lattimore, which I think was a great pickup as a cornerback, who at one time was a top cornerback. He's not what he used to be, but he's still very good, and he will definitely, I think, will help the Commanders in a big way. Baltimore had one of the more impressive performances of the week. Denver had been playing well coming into that game, and the Ravens and Lamar Jackson completely took them apart, 41-10. Baltimore, Lamar Jackson goes for 16-19, 283 touchdowns, a perfect quarterback rating. Derrick Henry does what Derrick Henry does. 23 carries, 106 yards rushing, a couple of touchdowns, and Baltimore just destroys Denver 41-10 in this game. This game was actually relatively close. I mean, at one point midway through the second half, through the first half, before Baltimore puts 31 points on them in the third, between the second and third quarters, and that was all she wrote. Denver has improved, and Denver's defense is pretty good. It's pretty good. So Denver is solid, but they're not the class of the upper echelon teams in the AFC when it comes to Baltimore, when it comes to Coach Kansas City, Baltimore, and those teams like that. So they, maybe Knicks is. I'm sure. I mean, the jury's still out on Bo Nix. The jury is still out on him as a quarterback, but Lamar Jackson just continues to dominate. We're going to talk more about him over the course of this program. So there you go with the fave, for a week number 9 in NFL action. Who won the week? Lamar Jackson. Right now, playing as well as any quarterback in the league. I can certainly make a case for him, even though I would give Josh Allen a slight edge for Lamar Jackson being the MVP of the league. Right now, he's the number 1 rated quarterback in the league, has number 1 QBR in the league, 20 touchdowns, just 2 interceptions, on pace to rush for 1,000 yards, and really hasn't taken a lot of hits, a lot of bad hits. Like Jaden Daniels can learn from Lamar Jackson as far as avoiding some hits at this stage of his career. and taking unnecessary hits. He has not taken a lot of unnecessary hits. A lot of that is due also to what Derrick Henry has done to take the rush load off him. Off him. So Lamar Jackson wins the week, and he is right there on pace to win a third MVP, possibly for the Baltimore Ravens. But of course, he has bigger things in mind. If you are a Ravens fan coming off what transpired last year in the AFC Championship. Looking ahead to Week 10 in the NFL, you have some interesting matchups. As we are in November now, again, not too far away from Thanksgiving. Very interesting matchup on Thursday. Cincinnati at Baltimore. They played, I thought, the game of the year a couple weeks back. Cincinnati has played better. They find themselves with a chance to make a playoff run. They have to win this game if I'm going to take Cincinnati serious as a team that could possibly make the playoffs. This is absolute must win for Cincinnati. They're not going. They're trailing Baltimore and Pittsburgh, so they're not going to win the division. They still have a chance at a wild card, at a possible wild card, to be a wild card team, and they absolutely have to win this. They have to win that game if they want any hopes of making the playoffs. Looking at some of the games also that of interest. Pittsburgh at Washington should be very good. Two physical teams that like to run the ball. Be a nice test. Pittsburgh's defense against Washington's running game. Dallas, Philadelphia does not have the juice that it once had, especially with no Dak Prescott. Dallas is banged up. Their season is absolutely in the toilet. Philadelphia playing well right now. We're headed towards a Philadelphia-Washington showdown as far as who's going to win the NFC East. It is without question a two-horse race at this point. Detroit at Houston would be interesting. Houston had a bad loss to the Jets. I mean, a horrible loss to the Jets last Thursday. Now they get an extra couple of days off, so they'll be refreshed. I expect them to play much better than what they showed against the Jets. They're going to have to against a very good Detroit rushing machine right now. So that should be interesting from that standpoint. Really, after that is Pickens are slim after that. Pickens are very slim after that, to be perfectly honest with you. So, Miami, Los Angeles, not a matchup that, now again, I told you about the Rams. The Rams are coming. They're playing well. We'll see. I mean, Miami does. I don't expect anything out of Miami, though. They have weapons. Still could be somewhat dangerous. So not a great week of, for the NFL coming up in this week 10. But again, that will change as we near closer to certainly to Thanksgiving. Real thoughts. Before I let you go, we're gonna obviously pay tribute to one of the legendary musical icons of the 20th and 21st century, for that matter. Of course, Quincy Jones passed away at the age of 91. 73 years in the music business. You're talking about someone 28-time Grammy winner, 18-time Grammy nominee. Just simply, one of the great, when I look at like a Nas or a Jay-Z, and I say that those guys are amongst the greatest writers, not only forget about in hip hop, but in any genre. Like any genre, I put Quincy Jones in that category as well. We're not just talking about one of the greatest writers, composers, arrangers in music, but just one of the greatest writers in the history of mankind. Like in television, in, if you want to go, books, whatever. Like you put him up there. I put him up there with Stephen King, William Shakespeare, whatever writer from any genre you could think of. Quincy Jones is up there. In that conversation, in that rarefied air. I think it's somebody, when I look at Quincy Jones, you look at someone who it was impossible to put him in a box. You're talking about working with artists, Michael Jackson, Ella Fitzgerald, Frank Sinatra. Peggy Lee, just to name a few. And you're talking about someone who did like, I mean, you're looking at the genres of music that he was involved with. R&B, of course, soul, funk, big band, swing, bossa nova, jazz, rock and roll, disco. This guy was an absolute master of his craft, and you want any like you want to get into the business, you want to be successful at anything in life. You can learn from somebody like a Quincy Jones in studying and mastering your craft. And he was he studied and mastered his craft. He thought outside the box. He never was confined with like this was a guy that was cultured, with traveled all over the world, and you know just again one of the iconic figures of music that you will ever see. One of the great careers that you frankly will ever see. They lived a full life. Yeah. Married a couple times, 7 kids. Of course, actress Rashida Jones. Um, founder of the Freshmen of Bel Air, because he started that. He had that going for him. And again, like I look at someone, over the course of their career, when you look at greatness, I'm always blown away by the longevity of someone's career. The true measure of greatness is how long can you do it, how consistent the length and consistency of your career. Of course, in any genre, there are some Haley comments, some people that might have shorter careers but just do it at a super super high level. This guy did it all. He did it all for a long, long, long time. And again, 91 years. We all would take 91 years. And again, you cannot tell the story of music or pop culture in the 20th or 21st century without mentioning the name Quincy Jones. I'm not even, I'm gonna leave the Joel Embiid stuff for Instagram. To be honest with you, I don't think Joel Embiid is even worthy of following Quincy Jones. So I'll leave that for Instagram, and of course, I will discuss the election results later on this week. As I mentioned earlier in the podcast, that's going to wrap it up for this latest edition of the Real Deal Podcast. Go vote, enjoy the election, enjoy the rest of your week. So long.